Hello, this is Dr. Steven Greer with the World Puja Network, and this is Conversations with Dr. Greer. I'm very excited to be joined today by Charlie Balogh, who's a musician and audio expert who does a lot of work for the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI.org, in analyzing tones and sounds and anomalous events that have happened. And he's been involved with our research group in the Phoenix area since for a number of years, and has been on a number of the CSETI expeditions as well for week-long periods, and has had some really astonishing experiences quite on his own as he began to get involved with the transdimensional conscious aspects of interstellar contact. And it's really exciting to have Charlie with us today so he can go through with us some of the really amazing tones and sounds that have emerged from transdimensional space-time around us, she will actually set up to play those for you so that you guys at the World Puja Network listening can hear it, and it'll be heard worldwide, and you'll be able to then hear an explanation of what led up to these amazing tones being heard by our contact group. For those of you who are new to this, I just want to introduce the concept, and that is that back in 1990, about 20 years ago, I founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, that's dedicated to studying the fact that we are being visited by advanced interstellar civilizations, but more importantly, to engage in what we call close encounters of the fifth kind. And a close encounter of the fifth kind is distinguished from the other types of contact events in that we are inviting contact through an organized contact team endeavor, a diplomatic effort, and it's based on a number of protocols, the primal one, the most important one, being the consciousness and the aspect of, as all of you at the World Puja Network will understand, that mind is a non-local, omnipresent field, and that as humans go into a state of quiet awareness, not only can you learn to remote view distant places, but that with extraterrestrial civilizations, their communication systems, which are scalar in nature and which can pick up on directed, coherent thought, you are enabled to contact them and then show them where you're located. So we use awareness and remote viewing and vectoring, as we call it, coherent thought sequencing, through consciousness to make contact. And then it's augmented by the use of lasers as well as tones. And this latter, the tonality, is very important. And as all of you who have studied the Vedas and the Pujas understand, tone precedes light and light precedes form. And the inner tonality of reality is really the first emergence from the unbounded absolute field of pure consciousness as it goes into manifest being. So this is why mantras and sounds and singing and tones and music are so important to culture, not just on Earth, but throughout the cosmos. And I think that understanding that and understanding that technologically there is a component of contact that is tonal is really critically important. And this goes back thousands of years, and we're not going to go into all of that, but in terms of modern history, it's very, very important for people to understand that, and to understand that this is sort of the triad of the contact protocols that CSETI is using involves consciousness, light, and tonality. And the tones that we use, we used to just have the tones from Colin Andrews from the crop circles that were recorded by the BBC and by Colin Andrews' team, when this amazing tone appeared omnidirectionally around them, and they got a brief recording of it, and we've been projecting that out into space using radio transceivers and what have you. Now we have a number of other tones, as well as segments of ET voices that have appeared, and much of this has been ramping up in the last 2 years, quite remarkably in the last couple of years. So we want to share a lot of this with you, and that's going to be the real focus of this particular interview, because we have this wonderful expert on sound and tone and audio engineering, Charlie Balogh, with us. So thank you, Charlie, for joining us.
Well, it's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time now, so I'm really excited about doing this.
So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about, how you got involved with this and the kind of experience you had in consciousness involving that gave rise to the CSETI kind of tonality, one of the tones in the music that you heard during this contact event, and to sort of set the stage for your own involvement.
Well, I first joined CSETI about 1990, and I was or 1991, I should say, and it was as a result of hearing one of your lectures here in Phoenix. I went to my first training in Joshua Tree in 2001, and part of the CSETI contact protocols involves going into meditation. And of course, we use meditation quite extensively throughout that process, not only during the actual contact sessions, but all through the entire training processes, which also include morning meditations as well. During one of these first morning meditation sessions that I had, then this was only the second day of the training, I went into what felt like a lucid dream, only I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was sitting there in my hotel room and just going into meditation, but it was in an immediate effect where I found myself outside what I felt like was like a field or something like that. And I looked up and I saw the CSETI logo. Now, those of you who are familiar with the CSETI website, we have an artist representation of what I actually saw during that lucid dream or vision or whatever you want to call it. And that'll help in this discussion if you are finding it hard to follow what it is that I'm talking about.
Right, you can go to CSETI.org and see that right now as you're listening if you're at a computer.
That's right, yeah. Well, what I saw was a three-dimensional version of that logo. And as those of you familiar with it, there are three globes or circles or spheres in an equilateral triangle, which are connected by lines or bars. What I saw in that vision was a three-dimensional representation of that. And each one of the globes had a sort of a translucent appearance. Within the globes were specific lights and shapes and forms. The logo it was rotating in a counterclockwise position, and it was huge in my vision. I could guesstimate that it was 150 to 250 feet across. Each one of the globes, in addition to having specific light and structure inside, also had a specific sound, which intrigued me and really surprised me. And it was very lucid. I could hear and see everything that was going on. The first globe had what looked like soft pulsing lights in it. And the music or the sound that I heard mimicked that or gave sort of a sonic representation of that. The second globe had what looked like a crystalline structure in it, very much like a lattice work, only of a very intricate clear crystal with sparkling lights, intensely sparkling lights, and the music again reflected that. The third globe had also crystalline structure in it, but it had movement inside, almost as if there were tiny gears that were rotating around each other. And once again, that sound was in motion, not only within the globe itself, but as the logo rotated, you could hear the sounds. I could hear the sounds passing in front of me, and each one of the connecting rods or lines had a specific sound as well, as though it were some sort of a power transference. that's the only way I can describe it. I'd like to play a little bit of that for you now.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So here it is.
Need to be a little louder.
Okay. This is the first globe. This is the second globe. And this is the third globe. And that's essentially what I heard. Now, what was amazing was, as a musician, I was fascinated by what I was hearing, and people who have heard this music asked me if I composed it, and that's not the case. It literally was a transcription of what I heard. Yeah, and it was frustrating at the time because I didn't have a keyboard in front of me to try and work out the ideas that I heard. So I had to take notes after the meditation. I came home after the training and then tried to recreate what it was that I heard.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And luckily, of course, one thing we found is that the extraterrestrial civilizations will have contact with people in certain ways where they have a certain capacity. In this case, obviously, since you're a musician and you know about audio and know how to compose and create sound, this was an aspect of their contact given to you that probably only you and a few other people would have. If it had happened to me, I might have, and I've had experiences like this where I've had the most beautiful tones and music, but I would never be able to reproduce them because I don't know anything about music. And so that's why this is so wonderful, and that's how we have found that this is why it's important to have a team of people from diverse backgrounds as well, is that we find that the ETs will, in a sense, utilize the skills and the gifts that each person has and that each person brings to the process.
Well, what was amazing to me, too, is that, most people think, well, what would extraterrestrial music sound like? And I was quite surprised to find it very tonal and not all that much different than what we're used to listening to, although I don't know if that was specifically geared for me or not with my experience and what we're used to listening to. So it may have been tailor-made for me as opposed to be just sort of a generic sound. Now, what's interesting about that is that on several trainings now, we've been playing this music out in the field within the circle using, a small boom box or something. A few years back, in Joshua Tree, we were on a break, and the music was playing on the boombox, and I decided to take a walk out into the desert just to get away from the crowd for a minute and experience things on my own. And I walked out about, say, 150, 200 yards out into the desert, far enough away that I couldn't hear the music from the group anymore. But I then heard this same music coming from the open desert in the opposite direction.
Right.
And it was just unbelievably unique and surprising at the same time. I stood there and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I said out loud, "I hope you enjoyed the music that I wrote for you." And it continued. And it wasn't shortly after that, I literally ran across back to the circle, another 100 yards on the opposite side where you were, and I brought you all back. And I think there was a few other people that we brought with us at the time.
Right. No, it was amazing. And this is exactly the kind of contact that happens that's very exciting and very interactive, and in the midst of this, of course, there are other types of phenomena going on, whether there's an orb or a craft that flies over, all kinds of other things. One thing I want to mention, and going back to the beginning, as it were, I wanted you to be able to share that story, and it's very important because the CSETI logo, which is 3 circles connected by lines, of course, you saw them three-dimensional as spheres, which is how they'd be in 3D.
Right.
That originated, if you go, a lot of these stories are in the new book that's come out called Contact Countdown to Transformation that has a DVD with it. And on that DVD is an aerial shot. We rented an airplane and went above this crop circle and actually filmed it. And it's a crop circle in England that appeared after Colin Andrews and I and a group of people went up on Woodborough Hill, and we all were given this vision of this form. And it was like it was given to us because we all agreed upon that form. And so we actually went into meditation, contacted the extraterrestrial civilizations, and asked them to make a crop circle. Mentally, we were doing this, visually, visualizing it. In that form, and the next morning, that crop circle form, which looks like this, which has become the CSETI logo, was found in a field very close to where we were by a farmer in the wee hours of the morning, at dawn, at like 5 in the morning or something, because you're so far north, the sun comes up very early in July, late July. And what was interesting about that is that it was, in a sense, a CE5 crop circle. And it was after this happened that Colin Andrews came forward and said, yes, in fact, even from the early days, from 1989, 1991, when we were getting involved with all this, he and Busty Taylor were flying over and looking at that time, they were these just simple circles that were appearing very near to where Colin Andrews lived. And at one point, he turned to Busty Taylor, and they were flying over this field. And they said to each other, wouldn't it be amazing if a circle appeared that combined all the different forms of circles that we've seen, a circle with a ring and with a Celtic cross and this and that, and the very next morning in exactly the spot when they said that to each other over that field, when they were flying over that point of that field, exactly that crop circle that combined all the elements appeared. So there is a interactivity of this that is transdimensional, that is mediated in consciousness and thought, which is really mind-blowing and has been dispositively proven to be possible. And this is where you then have to say, well, how is that happening? And one of the things I point out to people is that when you start dealing with these transdimensional technologies that permit travel faster than the speed of light and communication faster than the speed of light, you're dealing with technologies that cross into what I call over the crossing point of light and the speed of light. And when you get into that dimension, you're dealing with the realm of thought visualization, the astral realm, the realm of consciousness, and all of that. And this is why the science of consciousness, and certainly everyone at the World Puja Network understand this, the science of consciousness is the central science of the next 1,000 years. Of course, we need to get out the new energy technologies and all the things that have been suppressed for 100 years, but really that will be the big breakthroughs that happen in understanding how this is. And it's not just it is a science, and there is a methodology to it, not only for meditation, but also for contact and for manifestation. And that's what we're finding with these CSETI expeditions, and it just keeps accelerating. And one thing that Colin had happen, I mentioned this a moment ago, is one of the original tones that we used in our contact protocols were these tones that were recorded in a crop circle field where there was levitation and anti-gravity and all kinds of weird stuff happening, and it's an amazing story that Colin Andrews shares. And they did get a recording of this tone, and then we have it, and Charlie's been able to, really clean it up and what have you. So I don't know, Charlie, if you could play that so people can hear.
Sure.
This, by the way, when you get this DVD that comes with the book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, and you can get that at disclosureproject.org, is on there so that you can play this. And there's also a CD version of it, so if you want to go out into the wilderness somewhere and play these tones while you're doing the visualization and meditation, it's a very, very powerful one because this is from them. People say, why do we, radio transmit these out there? I said, well, this wasn't created by man. This was technological, and it's a tone, but it came from the ETs, so very important. So if you play that one now, Charlie.
Sure.
Maybe a bit louder.
One thing we should note about that is that the sounds that you're hearing are actually synthesized sounds. The original recording was done through a video recorder, a high-end video camera, and while Colin and his associates were walking through the crop circle, the energy of the crop circle literally fried all the gear, the video equipment, any audio equipment they had, and this sound was the only thing that survived the experience. Not only was it unique, it was also had a directionality to it because it came. It sounded like it came through one end of the circle and went out through the other, and that's why you hear the sounds fading in and out. The original recording had a lot of noise and static and everything on it. When I listened to it originally, I thought there was something very recognizable about it because the sound is actually the purest waveform there is, which is called a sine wave, and I was able to recreate it almost exactly as it was in the original recording, and I thought that was the salient part of the recording and not necessarily the context in which it took place.
Well, and of course, this is very significant that this has come from elsewhere, and that there was a recording, but and that whatever energy was in that field was so powerful that it did. I mean, there were these $75,000 BBC Betacams and equipment that completely had all kinds of circuits that got kind of fried from all this. And what I find interesting about these tones is that when we've had a lot of anomalous things happen with these tones. For example, when I first had the idea to take them and not just play them with an audio boombox or something, but also to take a radio and transmit them. The first time we did that, we were, believe it or not, on Marconi's Hill in England, where the first telegraph was sent in the 1800s. And we were up on this hill, and I had a transceiver, a radio transmitter and receiver, and I was transmitting these tones. And suddenly, after we finished, all around us in an omnidirectional way, a very similar sine wave tone came into space around us, and it had begun to rain and was windy, and all of us could hear this doo 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 doo, and it went around and around and around, and it was them answering us. And at other times we've done this where we've had the button pressed to send out the tone, and the ETs have overridden the circuit so that while we're transmitting, the tones or some variant of the tone comes back through the radio. Now, technically, anyone who knows anything about these radio receivers and transceivers know that when you're transmitting, you can't receive. You can either receive or transmit. In this case, we'll be transmitting. They'll override the transmission and come through. We've also had it happen where we've had the radios off, and they will start sending these tones through them even when they're turned off. Very, very strange electromagnetic, transdimensional electronics. And this is the sort of things, and this has happened dozens and dozens of times, and we've had people on our contact groups that are around the world who are using these tones in the meditation who have had all kinds of variants of the same kinds of strange experiences with these tones. So, by the way, there is a training kit at disclosureproject.org that you can get that has the CDs with all these different tones on them and the meditation instruction and all of that that's on that site. And I think that what people are finding is that the tonality can come, and it is often directional, but often omnidirectional. In other words, it'll seem to appear in just space around you with nothing that you can see that's originating it, and then it spreads out in sort of an omnidirectional way. And this is exactly what happened at Mount Shasta a few years ago. We were up in the National Forest on the slopes. I guess we were up at about 5,000 feet at Mount Shasta in what we call our secluded site. And we were there, and I was doing the guided meditation where we go into deep meditation, and then we go in expansion of awareness and go into space and make contact, and then we do this sort of prayer and meditation for the healing of the earth and for universal peace. And during that process, just at a moment when I paused, because I felt something coming, everyone in the circle heard this tone that then they could see in their mind. Now, Linda Willits had a tape recorder on that was just an old-fashioned, wasn't digital, one of those tape recorders, with a tape. And she got just a little bit of it, and it's really a faint hint of what we actually experienced, because what we actually experienced was something coming from within space-time that emerged, and the tonality of it was so pure and so amazing that everyone saw in their mental imaging, it overrode anything that you were thinking about, where you saw these spheres, very similar to the spheres that Charlie just explained with his experience some years ago. But in this case, they became like a string of spheres as the tone moved, almost like a string of pearls that were these perfect spheres, sort of a pearly, grayish white color that was formed by the tone. And this is very Vedic. Again, people with the World Puja Network understand the concept in the Vedas of name and form, where the sound tonality within thought can manifest and materialize an object. In this case, it was an extraterrestrial vehicle that was there represented in its tonality, but then visually in people's minds we could see the form of it. as it floated through the circle. And I don't know if you can play that Shasta tone.
Yeah.
It's again. This is a very faint, a little teeny clip of it, and I hate to say this, but sort of just an indication of what happened. But the experience of it was so rich and so multidimensional and transdimensional when it happened. But with the quality of the electronic recording device that we had at the time, this is as much as we got.
Yeah, and what I've done here is isolate it, and I looped it several times, and also reduced it in pitch, so you could hear that it had an actual tonal aspect to it. So here it is. Now, this is also, there's an interesting story that goes along with this, because I first heard about it through Linda and Trudy Geiker, one of our other longtime members, outside of the training, because I wasn't actually there. When they described to me that image of pearls in a straight line, it reminded me of the harmonic structure of music, where you have a fundamental tone and upper harmonics that rise up from that point, variations on that same sound. It's a very important aspect of all of this is the harmonic structure of those sounds as well. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And again, this is one of the things we're working on right now that Charlie's helping us with is to figure out how to have really better quality digital omnidirectional recording on site, so that we get a better quality recording of these sorts of events, because they've escalated from a number. Now, this has happened, dozens of times, and as you can imagine, with just inexpensive equipment, people holding them in their laps and what have you, we haven't gotten as many of them as we would like. What we're going to do now is that we're going to begin to have a specialized recording, a binaural or whatever it's called, recording system hooked to a digital recording device, so that when these events happen, hopefully we'll get a better quality. Someday, if we had the funding, we would like to have half a dozen of these scattered out in the field around us, because often we'll find that it'll be very specific, where even though it's quite loud, people only in one area of space hear it and other people don't. Because it's very anomalous. It's transdimensional. It's not coming from a linear source. It's coming from a transdimensional source from other dimensions, as these ET craft are in the area. And prior to their materializing, or when they're dematerialized, they can emit or communicate with us with this kind of tonality. So I think that's what's really exciting about it. Essentially what the binaural recording is a set of mics that are positioned like human ears on a mount of some sort, and what they do is hear sound in three dimensions, not only left to right like stereo, but also as the human ears would hear it, above and below and behind, so that when we use these microphones, we'll be able to tell which direction it's coming from, whether it's in motion, which has often happened during the trainings. And so I'm excited about doing that sort of thing. And one of the other things that have happened is recently, just I think a little less than 2 months ago in September,
we were up on Mount Shasta again, and we were up at this place up way high on the mountain at an area called Sand Flats. It's this big flat plain up about 7,000 feet, I believe, or nearly 7,000 feet. And right in front of where Dr. Bravo and I were sitting, there was the most beautiful emission in just clear air of a sort of musical chimes that appeared. Now, I don't know, Charlie, if you have been able to isolate any of that.
Yeah, I did.
But when we heard it, it was almost like, I hate to say it almost sounded like angelic music. It was otherworldly music, and it was just a few notes of it, and it appeared, I mean, no more than 3 or 4 feet in front of ourselves in the center of the circle. And there, too, no one had a recording device that was very good. Linda was holding one in her hand, and at the time there were some people talking or doing something, or rattling something. So it was sort of overwhelmed with other ambient noise. But it was so pure. It was like crystalline. It was this pure, crystalline, multiple notes that were just beautiful. And this was around the time that we had some astonishing sightings that we did get filmed on videotape of craft that had come right over and materialized over the group and flown over. So it's all part of the contact events that are happening at these expeditions. So if you want to share that, I think that'd be great if you can.
And also, same thing here. I've isolated it, looped it, and changed pitch a couple of times so you can hear it from those aspects as well. It almost has a sort of a whistle quality to it.
Yes, well, that was it actually didn't. I mean, when you were there, I was there, and I was only 3 feet from it, and it was absolutely a series of completely pure, crystalline notes, and they were so beautiful that you felt beauty when you heard it. It was truly beautiful. And one of the reasons why I point this out, and I'm so glad we did get some of this recorded, is that the effect in awareness is also very profound, because when you heard it in real time, it actually had an effect, and it was loud enough that people on the opposite side of the circle, and we had like 35 or 40 people there, heard it. And now some people didn't hear it, and that may be because they had hats on and had their ears covered up, or just don't have very acute hearing. But it was heard from quite some distance away, and it had an effect on the awareness because it was such a pure tonality that emerged around us. And often this happens when there's an extraterrestrial being nearby as well as a craft. And, of course, we heard last year when we were at Joshua Tree National Park, we had a sphere that materialized out in the desert beside us as we were taking a break, and as I walked back, it followed us back. And when we got back to the circle of the whole group, we heard a group of ET voices, and I have these very, very sophisticated night scope binoculars, and I looked over in the area where we heard these voices. It was 3 or 4 male and female voices speaking. You couldn't see anything, and these were with like 4th generation night scopes. But you could hear exactly where they were gathered. And it was there that a little while later, just a couple minutes later, this sphere reappeared and created this cone of light with this ET hovering in it just outside the seats. And this is at CSETI.org. There's a picture of this ET being that we later learned came from the Andromeda Galaxy. And it's very, very clear, but he's transdimensionally. It's sort of like an astral electronic projection. If you can visualize your astral body that you fly around in a lucid dream, at that level of energy being able to be electronically transmitted into a site during a contact event. Now, unfortunately, at that time we did not have anyone recording, so we could have gotten, this brief few seconds of these voices speaking, but it was heard by a large number of people at the same time. And this is one of the reasons why I tell people when we go out on these expeditions, even if you don't see everything going on, there's contact happening almost continuously, because we set up these protocols to invite these interstellar civilizations to meet with us for interplanetary peace and for universal peace. It's become this worldwide effort where now there are thousands of people doing this all over the world, literally in virtually every country. And it's creating its own power, as it were, as in consciousness as people do this. But when we're out doing these expeditions with 30 or 40 people or whatever, it has a power because there's a group of humans who are reaching out to these visitors saying, we want to make contact with you peacefully. We want to open contact. And we're doing this in the context of universal consciousness as the real central communicating philosophy of interspecies contact between worlds, and that we're doing this for universal peace to benefit all peoples, not just on Earth but other worlds. And that's the spirit that they want to see people advancing into this contact work with, because, up until now, the only contact they've had have been people in a state of bewilderment or denial, or being chased by jet fighters or electronic weapon systems or electromagnetic weapons or what have you. There has not been an organized global outreach like this. And I'm convinced that when we started this 20 years ago, we immediately started having these sorts of events and contact happening, not because we're important, but the concepts, the ideas are important. And there aren't any organized governments doing it. And the United Nations isn't doing it. And to the extent that there is a group that knows about this, that are in sort of secret projects, they have a very militarized approach to the presence of these extraterrestrial civilizations, which is, of course, harmful rather than helpful. And I think that that's why they're very eager, so that if wherever you are, I know there's people worldwide listening to this interview, if you learn these techniques in meditation with the mantra, remote viewing, using these tones, and then, of course, we have lasers that we send up to also send up a vector that I'll often send them up in rhythm with these tones, by the way, that what will happen is that if you do it within this philosophy, if I can use that concept, of peaceful contact for the benefit, mutual benefit of all concerned, they will respond. Now, they may not respond the way you expect, and this is where I tell people there are literally a million different ways that we've had these extraterrestrial civilizations respond, and it runs the gamut from the sort of experience that Charlie had, which was this amazing, almost like a hypnagogic dream, remote view consciousness experience, transdimensional, to fully materialized craft that we've videotaped and photographed, to tones that have come inside the circle, to us sitting in meditation out in the desert and having people touched, to having actual extraterrestrial beings fully materialized, which they have done, where people look and they'll see a group of 3 or 4 of them standing outside the circle, fully standing there, and these sort of things. So it runs the gamut. The main point, though, is not the phenomenon per se, but the fact that they're responding because of how we're approaching the issue. And the approach is one that is rooted in the Vedic knowledge of the universality of mind, that the conscious mind whereby every single sentient being in the universe is awake, is one. There's a singularity of the light of awareness, and then everything emanates from there. And if you understand that, they certainly understand it, because you can't travel faster than the speed of light without understanding transdimensionality and the primacy of consciousness and mind. And these civilizations that are, some of them literally are millions of years more developed than human civilization is on Earth today, certainly understand all the Vedas and the cities, SIDDHIS, the development of different powers and gifts that are described in the Vedas. These civilizations understand that and have it at a level where it's been developed even technologically, whether it's levitation, dematerialization, bilocation, trilocation, remote viewing, precognition, looking into the future, looking into the past, traveling faster than the speed of light. All of these things, and this is one of the reasons why the whole paradigm of contact has to get out of the linear mindset of radio signals and this sort of thing, to an understanding of what kind of civilization and what kind of contact will we have as a consequence of contact with civilizations that are traveling faster than the speed of light. Because if you are moving beyond light speed, both for communication and for traveling of your spacecraft and your people, you're not doing that in staying in a solid materialized form. You're developed electronics where the craft and everyone on it literally go through a resonant field shift and pop into another dimension and travel in that form. And when we're out in the desert or we're up on the mountain, we're getting ready to go to Joshua Tree National Park again, although that event is sort of fully subscribed right now. But we'll be doing this again. We're planning to have a week in Florida. We hope this winter. You can sign up for our mailing list at CSETI.org to find out where these next expeditions will be. We may be doing something again in Southern California this winter. We'll certainly be in Crestone, Colorado in June for a week, and we're going to be doing another week expedition in the crop circles in England this coming summer in July, and we'll be back up at Mount Shasta at the last week of August, and we'll be back at Joshua Tree again in 2011 in November. So we do a number of these a year. Usually we do 4 or 5 of these week-long expeditions, and sometimes some shorter ones, and those are opportunities for the public to come and learn these techniques. But what I want to emphasize is that they're not difficult to learn, and once you understand the principle of consciousness and why transdimensional technologies are interfacing with thought and consciousness, then a lot of this very strange, people would call just sort of weird phenomena begins to make sense, because you're dealing with civilizations that deal with this type of expression as easily as we talk on a cell phone or turn on a light switch. But this only makes sense that if you really stop and think about it, how are you going to travel amongst star systems and amongst galaxies that at the speed of light you can never get there? You'd be dead before you could get there. It's too far a distance. So when you're dealing with these sort of technologies and civilizations that have mastered them, and you're asking for contact, it can happen in amazing ways, and that's what we're finding, and it's escalating. Now, the other thing that has escalated, and this is particularly in the last 12 months, 11 or 12 months, is that we've had a phenomenon, which I'll just say is brief bleed-throughs transdimensionally of ET voices right in the center of the circle or right near us. And this has happened several times. It just happened in England when we were there in England this past summer in July. It happened last November in Orange County when we did a one-day workshop up in near Irvine. And it happened at Joshua Tree, as I mentioned, although at that time it didn't get recorded. But we do have a couple of these, and unfortunately, again, these are very brief recordings. But if you can do those for us, Charlie, a couple of these voices may be interesting for people to hear.
The first one is from the Orange County event, and I have two clips here. The first one is a short. It's only about 30 seconds long. It'll give you a context of where this took place and how it took place. We were in the process of, or they were in the process of sharing what had happened during a previous segment of the training, and the voice shows up about halfway through. It's difficult to get an idea of what's going on because it was recorded with a stereo recorder, and it happens very briefly in the left channel. You can hear it in stereo, but you won't hear it in stereo here. So here's the context, and then I'm going immediately afterwards. I'll play the voice itself being looped. So here's the context clip.
Okay.
That's what I mean. What messages, thoughts, images? Okay. So they're scanning. You want to just hear a voice? No. It was like a bloop. Oh.
Okay, so that's the context clip. Now, if you're paying attention, you heard this very clear, very quick little sound, so almost like someone saying, check. Here's the loop.
Now, I want to say that what we heard, and this is more anomalous, everyone sitting near me, it happened right in front of me and Linda and Jan, Dr. Bravo, we heard at least four distinct syllables. But when we listened to the audio tape, even though you were hearing all the talking and we have radar detectors that started going off as we were having transdimensional contact with these electronic laser and radar detectors, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, by the way, then we heard these four syllables. But when you listen to the tape, there's only like one or two, even though there's no break in the tape. So the transdimensional nature of it, even though our ears heard it, the tape recording only picked up part of what was heard, even though it was recording all the other sounds and people talking. I just want to point out that that in itself is bizarre and sort of anomalous.
This loop segment also is looped to slow down the actual sound that's heard, so you can hear it expanded out a little bit. So.
Right.
And of course, you're hearing on that last clip, you're hearing a little bit of the digital processing that takes place when you slow it down.
Right. Yeah, and so what was interesting is that a few days later, we went from Orange County up to Joshua Tree National Park, where we had this picture of this amazing image of the picture of this ET hovering outside the circle. But also during that week, we were one morning, I was upstairs meditating in my room, and I was in this deep meditative state when I was contacted by an ET that said something quite bizarre. He just said, the Joshua trees transmit star energy. Just very matter-of-factly like that. And it was clear as a bell. The Joshua trees transmit star energy. It was absolutely clear. And if you look at Joshua trees, they have these sort of needle-like leaves on them that look like little antennas. They look like clusters of antenna. And the ETs were saying that they absorb and then transmit back out some sort of strange and subtle energy from the stars around the Earth. And now what's interesting is that at the time that happened, underneath where my room was, there was Dr. Bravo and Raven Avolsi and Linda Willits were up having coffee already, and they heard this same voice kind of whisper, because I guess they knew I was meditating upstairs. They were being polite, whisper, and it was a male voice, clearly, amongst them. And they all three heard it. In fact, they turned to each other and said, did you hear that? Did you just whisper? And it was this voice again. So it all started then, and then continued on with the contact out in the field with this being that we photographed. And then in England, and we've had it happen numerous times as well since then. But then in England, we were sitting, and I believe it was the last night we were out, and we were sitting in this field. In fact, we were sitting exactly at this spot where in 1992 we had about a 100-foot diameter spacecraft fully materialized in the field. And if you get the book Contact, Countdown to Transformation, that has the DVD of a lot of these images, you'll see that account. Well, we're sitting right there at that same spot at this farm that has 1,800 acres that we're given permission to use every year. We'll be there again this coming July in 2011. We suddenly heard on the outside of the circle, but beside a member of our team who provides security for me and also does a lot of photography, again, a male voice very clearly speak. And I don't know if you have that one as well.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and again, just a little bit of it got recorded, but we all heard it very distinctly, and it was no one in our group. It was outside the circle and just emerging in thin air where there was an extraterrestrial being that was there, but in a dematerialized form.
Right. This clip, you'll hear at the very beginning a bit of the radar detectors going off, then a quiet spot where I eliminated some of the background noise, and then you'll hear one portion of the tape which comes up very quickly, and you'll hear the voice and then some comments afterwards. So.
I heard a voice. Did you? Right here. Yes, right here.
I thought that was Edmonton.
No.
I did too. And you said you thought it was you didn't say anything?
Okay. Now I'll play it again so you can hear it one more time.
Yeah, the voice is amazing.
Right. Whoops. Hold on. There we go.
I heard a voice. Did you? Right up.
It was an interesting sound, certainly.
Did you isolate it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you mean just the voice itself?
Yes.
No, I did, but I couldn't find a clip for the show, so.
Okay, that's fine. Well, yeah. It's interesting because when you listen to it, it almost sounds like au revoir. It almost sounds like goodbye in French. Right. And we had just come from France where we had an expedition. Now, I can't say that's what this was saying. Right. But it's very strange. And again, so much of this is a bit mind blowing because we're sitting there, and as you heard, the detectors, we have these radar and laser detectors, and they were going off. We're in the middle of this 1,800 acre farm out in the middle of nowhere, where there's no source of anything that would make them go off, and then this voice of just standing no more than a foot or two outside our circle makes these just a couple of syllables that, of course, yes, you heard from the conversation. Many of us heard, and I knew immediately what it was. Of course, someone thought it was actually this member of our team who, where it happened most closely, was actually speaking, and he wasn't. I know what his voice sounds like. He was completely silent. So, these are the things that are continuing to happen, and we just wanted to give you a sample of the sort of tones and contact events that go along with this structured spacecraft and the objects that we're filming and the other kinds of experiences in consciousness because, again, it runs the gamut from thought and consciousness to fully materialized craft to anomalous tones that are omnidimensional and omnidirectional to lights that appear. Now, one of the things I do want to mention also, in Orange County, right around the time that we heard that voice right in front of us, there was a brilliant white light that burst into the center of the circle on one side of the circle, and then a few seconds later burst on the other side. And this was seen by dozens of people when this happened. So, these are the kinds of things that happen in conjunction with this. And a lot of people say, well, why don't they just land like the mothership in Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And I said, well, this is something that, number one, we're not sure everyone's quite ready for that. But number two, there are military projects that track these spacecraft when they do appear, and that are increasingly targeting them and hitting them. And this is not a myth that there have been many dozens of extraterrestrial vehicles that have been shot down using advanced, what are called scalar weapons. And scalar weapons go faster than the speed of light, and we have them in classified projects. So we always ask the ETs to appear in any way that is safe and appropriate for the time and place we're in and for the group that's there, and then we sort of like give it to them and let them choose how they're going to do this. And we're never disappointed, and it's always something new. I can say after 20 years of doing this, I kind of go from astonishment to astonishment as these things have unfolded. So, well, I think we're about out of time, and I'd like to thank you, Charlie, for doing all this work for us with the audio and the analysis, and there's certainly more that we have, but we're out of time, and I do appreciate your expertise, and all of us do, because it's something we really do need. And
it's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the people at the World Puja Network for sponsoring us here every 2 weeks, and we're going to have these programs continuing with different people on our team to share these perspectives and experiences. And check the website at CSETI.org, CSETI.org, for the 2011 schedule of events that will be coming up. And I hope to see some of you at those. Until then, keep looking up, and God bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye.